Tonight we are joined by Tyrone Macklee Randle, and we're going to be hearing from him about his journey. And it's one that I'm particularly excited for, I think, because I've known you, Tyrone, for a long time, I think.
Yeah, back in my ad days, it's been almost 10 plus years now.
Yeah, it's making me feel old. And I've just really loved seeing your work grow and evolve and the different paths you've taken. So I think this will be really exciting for everybody to hear and also hopefully to interact and engage with. So the biggest question I got, and the one that I always like to be asked myself, is how do you define yourself? How do you define you as an individual, as an artist, as a creative, as a human?
Flow. I live by the phrase, let it go, let it flow. So I take that into my art. I take it into my life situations, like relationships, jobs, so if it doesn't work, it doesn't, and you just let it go, let it flow. That's, and it's all nature, like just like the force of nature is that things happen and life continues. So yeah.
I love that. I like that it's a one word, but it's also like an entire experience, a feeling, a force of nature, physics, right? All of it. It also ties into your work too. Is that intentional?
Intentional, yeah.
Excellent. And we'll be seeing some of Tyrone's work scanning through as we go. So I know you got the flow for your definition of yourself. Is that how you would define your creative practice?
It's a lot more meticulous. I feel like because I want so seriously to give off a certain energy with the work that it is very, very much like planned. So, but if it doesn't work, then it has to go, right? So yeah, in some ways it does, but other ways it's more so the concept of, just the belief in that idea. And hopefully it's conveyed through the work as opposed to just letting go on the canvas. Cause I've always had issues just, not having control. So
Sure.
yeah.
I love that. And it's not on my cards, it's not on my questions. But what I love about that idea too is I feel like a lot of young artists or a lot of new artists get into this mindset of, art is a thing. It is kind of a byproduct of your own being in a way, right? And I feel that way too. Like I make stuff that I don't even know what it is. We were kind of talking about this earlier. Like you put it out there, it comes out of you, but like might not have as much direction or as much meaning. But what I appreciate about what you're saying is that in order to get that proper idea, in order to express yourself in the way that you want to, you actually might have to take a step back from that energy and that flow and orchestrate the flow in a way, right?
That makes a lot of sense. Yeah.
That's interesting. I'm going to be thinking about that when I'm back in my studio. And you talked a bit about kind of that ideology, but what's the motivation that drives you? Like why? So that creative urge, what puts that there? Why is that there?
I think the love for the planet, and especially being Black in Milwaukee, like the disconnectedness that we have to the planet is, I think is really sad. But I also know it's like latent in history, like it's latent in, it being beaten out of us to a degree, and then you don't really want to return to the forest after you ran through it to get away. So I don't know. I think about like the whole, idea of, like Black people don't like to go outside. Like we don't like camping. We don't like, swimming is like an issue for us, especially since the transatlantic slave trade. So I'm just like, that is very latent in my work because I want that to be reversed. I want that idea to be reversed. Even looking at the litter, that you see in, inner city neighborhoods, it's like there's a disconnect from the planet, culturally. And it makes me so sad. It makes me hot, so yeah, it's intentional.
I feel that. Yeah. I think it's interesting too, hearing you say that, it's also like the migration out of the South, out of farmland into more urban areas, as a huge cultural movement or as a societal movement. It's interesting though now that what I've observed, I'm going to speak from my own experience. I've observed that a lot of people are trying to return to farming, to traditional things, but it's also maybe, I don't know, could be a result or a direct reaction to the African American population wanting to return to that as well. I'm just going to leave that there.
Oh, it's a saying that it's not hot until we do it. I don't know.
Well, not even that it's not hot until you do it, but once it's valuable or it's a commodity, or
then everyone seeks it out. But
Yeah.
I don't know if you look at the media right now. That's just it's laden in just people wanting to identify with everything else other than what they were raised as, which is normal. That's human nature.
Yeah.
To go out and like seek. So that's all we're seeing.
So this kind of brings up another, this is off the cuff question. So if you're like, this is crazy, I don't want to answer it. If you had a choice right now, stay here on planet Earth, rehabilitate it, or take that ticket to Mars and start fresh, where are you going?
Ooh, start fresh on Mars. Well, what's on Mars? I already know what I'm dealing with down here. I don't know what's going to be up there, So I don't know. I think I might try my chances here. Yeah, I'll try my chances here. Yeah.
Excellent. Okay. Let's see. So that's, we're thinking future, or I was thinking future. Bringing it back, when you were a kid, did you know creative arts, creativity was a path for you, or what did you want to be when you were little?
I always
When
wanted
you
to be
grew
an
up?
artist.
Always?
Always. Van Gogh was the first artist to like really inspire me. It was the colors and like the vibrant strokes and the expression. I could also tell that he, like, even as a kid, I was kind of like really aware of like people and like how they move, like the subtle shifts in your eye. Just kind of like really observant of things. And his story made sense to me. Like he was kind of losing his mind, And even as a kid, I could understand how people could lose their minds because life was a lot,
Yeah.
So I really, really clung to his work for a long time. And that pushed me through school until I started kind of finding my own voice.
How little are we talking here? Is this Van Gogh?
Oh man, I
for
mean
kindergartners?
like
Van Gogh?
kindergarten.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, when we were like having to replicate the Starry Night with oil pastels. Like, yeah, it was good times.
Shout out to any elementary school teachers?
I cannot remember her name. I'm so sorry. I feel so bad. I can't remember her though.
But it's all good though. I think it's the seed that gets planted that grows, right? So it doesn't matter who put it there. But
Yeah.
I've seen a lot of Starry Night projects in my day, and I feel like this is just a really good promotion for Keep It Up, right?
Keep it up, right? Yeah, definitely.
So I'm really interested too, like at what point did you see a real clear kind of departure? You mentioned that, Van Gogh's work kind of carried with you and the movement, the motion, the colors. Did you ever hit a point where you're like, I'm doing the Van Gogh thing, I got this, now I'm doing my own thing? Was there a cusp? Was there like a moment that you recognized that?
I think I've hit a pivotal point in my life where I didn't idolize anyone. I don't know. I just saw everybody as human. Like I still do now. Like it's just like there's no reason to think that this person should be set on this mantle so high, which is even like we had this conversation earlier just between me and you about like feeling or whether or not you're deserving of an eye.
Yeah.
So like I just yeah.
Yeah, that's good.
I was like
good.
losing my thought there, but yeah.
Well, I know I feel like I got most empowered in my own making when I started working at the Milwaukee Art Museum. And the reason is I felt like I kind of held myself to a standard where I'm like, if I can't reach that level, why am I deserving to put this out there? Why should I put this out there? But seeing artwork in person, being, hearing from artists and being like, oh, wow, like I see that spill of paint, or I see where that pencil line isn't fully erased. You're like, this is a real person doing a real thing. So I think that's part of this for me too, is like humanizing the people making the work rather than looking at it, being intimidated by it and thinking, why?
Like separating yourself from like that experience is like, yeah, I don't know. It's weird.
Yeah.
That people idolize people. That's a different conversation, but I think it's really weird. I think everybody's capable. And that's the one thing that I like to drill into my students. Like everybody can learn how to do this. It doesn't matter what it is, whether it be music, art, cooking, whether you want to, get really buff and learn how to flip boulders, you can learn the proper way to do anything. So go for it.
Yeah. I love that. That lifelong learning too is a huge thing. That's why I always, mention it when I'm kind of talking to the people in the audience or in the room, like, this isn't just for like young people. This is for, you're like 90 years old and you're like, I've never painted, but I see this. I think it's cool. Let's give it a shot. It's really important to keep that creative spark. I mean, maybe to make the spark if you haven't made it yet. I'd also like to share this too. I think this is something I want to put out in the world, but I met one of your students this past weekend at a Saturday event that we were doing with AWE, and I just wish I could have captured the look on their face when they realized that the flyer they were holding promoting this artist talk was their teacher.
Yeah.
It was so powerful, and it's something that we've actually experienced with a lot of the residencies that we've done, is that, you know, young people seeing teachers as artists, artists as teachers, you know, thinking of the creative power that somebody that they don't necessarily see as a quote unquote artist or a creative person. You know, it's like when you see your teacher at the grocery store, you're like, wait, you're a real person.
Yeah.
But I almost feel like a real person as an artist gets that additional boost. You know, there's that pedestal that gets put on. So it was really cool to see them make that connection.
Yeah, that's, again, back to the little pedestal thing. I'm just like, like when he told me about it, when you told me about it, I was like cringing, but it also kind of, you know, filled me up a little bit. I think we all need a little, you know, a little bit of a boost, because it just let me know that, you know, what you're doing is inspiring them to keep going. Like the fact that I'm still working as an artist and teaching inspired, you know, a whole conversation with him about, you know, how he loves art, you know. Yeah. And I never knew that before, but yeah.
Well, and we run into teachers too that have been teaching for so long that they might not see themselves as artists anymore, or, you know, their specialty, their focus, their energies get put into the classroom and maybe not into their own studio practice. So can you share maybe, I know it's not been a long time, but is there a little secret sauce, or have you noticed anything kind of overlapping as somebody kind of newer to the everyday classroom experience? Where do you see the excitement to come back into your studio?
I think it's for me having to teach kids practices that I have not touched in years. So like even touching sculpture again, like I'm doing all of these, like, you know, plaster casts of like faces with my kids, and they're making masks out of them. But the whole process of like having to put the plaster in the mold and breaking it out and like just getting back to what I had to do when I was in school, learning it myself. And then, like, you know, with the drive that I had back then, it just reminded me and re-inspired me about, like, you know, what it is that I do. But it also, one thing that drives me is that those who can't do teach. And I never wanted to be that person. Yeah, so like I've been doing after school programming for like the last like 10 years. But now I have a classroom where I'm teaching the curriculum. I have more control over it. I feel like there's nothing that they can't do without me behind them.
I love that. That's awesome. I love that. Give me a little misty-eyed. So thinking about that sweet phrase, that sweet moment, going back to what you just said though, do you feel like there's an element of defiance to that? Like, has that been something that, like, as a young person, you felt like art was an act of, you know, kind of proving something to somebody, or that idea of like early on, like trying to paint like Van Gogh, right? Was it a little bit of a challenge? Is that something that drives you in your work, or ever did?
Yeah, like I definitely always wanted to be able to like replicate the greats. That was always, for me when I was a kid, before I like learned about my own identity as an artist, it was like this is how I know I'm good. Yeah. You know what I mean? This is how I know I'm worth something. And that's the only reason that when I went to Maya, they gave me a scholarship, because I was skilled enough, but conceptually it was lagging, you know? So yeah.
Did you have to unlearn anything from a traditional art school education?
Oh, yeah. Oh gosh. Just being in those critiques sometimes was like really rough. I remember kind of walking around that school with a dictionary for 2 years, because the critiques were like hard, man. Like they're using words like ambiguous and juxtaposed together, and I'm just like, I'm not sure what you're talking about. And then I saw myself starting to like use that in everyday conversation with like people that had no idea what I was saying, and I had to unlearn. Like, okay, you got to learn how to chameleon again, because you've been in this world for so long that now it's hard to like relate to everyday people. I think a lot of artists go through that, the whole like metamorphosis of like who you present yourself to be to the public now, as opposed to like how everyone knows you. So I don't know.
Yeah. What's interesting too, I find myself in educational settings, you know, the practice of you say the big word and then you say like the 2 or 3 small words that mean the same thing so that people can kind of pick up and the jargon, right? Like acronyms, like the blah, 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 you know, like some of that stuff's shorthand to make life easier, but it's also like setting up that exclusive space. And it's interesting that artists sometimes are like, why don't people like my stuff? Well, they don't understand it because it's weird, maybe. I'm speaking from my personal experience.
Yeah.
But then when you're also explaining it to them, it's like totally different conversation.
Like sometimes you even ruin it, you know, just by opening your mouth.
I had the best critique. This was when I was still in school, in college, from my uncle. And he looked at me and he's like, this. It was about family. We were talking about the piece too, is like fabrics and things. And he was like, I bet you didn't think a farmer could understand this fancy art stuff. And I'm like, I didn't say that, but I'm also like stunned. I'm impressed. So that's a really important thing to keep in mind. So you had mentioned how long you've been in after school programs. Now you're in a classroom. When you're thinking about life as an artist, like a career path, right? What's been your journey? You know, have you always been involved in creativity? Did you have that, you know, quote unquote day job working at a burger place or, you know, outside of the arts? And what's that kind of journey? And do you feel like that helped you, whether it's creatively or just financially? Like, can you talk a little bit about all that?
Just growing up, I like my living situation with my parents was just very stereotypical Milwaukee in terms of, you know, what we had. So I had to work a lot. I was working full time when I was in college. So that definitely was a drive. Like I was carrying my full body sculptures on the bus from Brown Deer, you know, and, you know, working at Dave & Buster's and walking to Wauwatosa to get home. So it was a lot of drive, a lot of resilience, but that was instilled in me by my parents. Hard working, hard, like driving, you know, and yeah, I'm almost getting emotional thinking about that. But I feel like every job that I've worked, there isn't a field that I haven't touched. Whether it be a restaurant, whether it be the nonprofit world, whether it be, you know, the art community, I do music. So it's like all of this stuff that I've been blessed to touch always inform. Whether how I'm talking to people, whatever space I'm in, it informs it all.
I was just going to ask that question, so thank you. If you had to go back to a non-creative, non-art related job, are there any that still kind of like, that you have nostalgia for, that you kind of miss the type of work?
I'm like randomly an anthropologist or you know, or archaeologist, anthropologist, whatever you want to call it. And I would love to return somewhat to that field of practice that I have no degree in. But, you know, it's like a world that I kind of just dived into, and I would love to continue that.
I love that. I feel like that's a little bit of a plug if anyone out there has any projects, wants some creative input in the anthropology area. Are you referring to your work with the George Marshall Clark Project?
Yes.
I wanted to ask you about that. Can you, for those people who might not be familiar with it, can you share a little bit about your role and kind of the journey with that if you'd like? And then I got a few questions with you about that too.
So for anybody who does not know about George Marshall Clark, there's a lot of young people in here. George Marshall Clark is the only person who's documented as a lynching victim in the state of Wisconsin. And he was lynched here in Milwaukee in 1861. They hung him from a pile driver downtown on like water in Buffalo. So that's where Shake Shack is down there. And in 2020, I was marching for George Floyd. I was organizer to a degree, and a lot of the cops there knew my face. I got beat up that night. I got hit by a car because they left me in the middle of the street that day. After trying to detain me, they left me in the middle of the street, and I like essentially died under that car. So it's kind of hard to talk about, but it's also easy because my story is my power, and that's how I think about with my art as well. So, but that, you know, that just my thought process was that I survived a modern day form of a lynching because, you know, it was the cops were involved in that situation. And it made me think about George Marshall Clark, who I only found out about doing a independent study at MyAd. And I knew nobody else knew about him. but I felt so connected to that story then, and that was my way of healing myself out of the wheelchair and off of my crutches. Was that drive to one, march for him, but we wanted to pay our respects first, and so we looked for his grave, but we could not find it. It took us 2 days. It was unmarked. And then we located him in Forest Home Cemetery and got him a headstone placed in 2021.
Well, thank you for that work, Tyrone. Sorry, I feel like that to me was such an important part too. Just your work, I feel like really there's a shift in your work, and like kind of following you. Like, I don't want to be creepy, but like, we're friends on social and stuff.
Totally
and like,
was.
I could see that work, or I could see that experience kind of shifting your work a bit. And I feel like your work got more figurative. It got more in the present experience, like as opposed to kind of like exploring externally. It seemed to be a lot more internal, but also like working with the forms, like human form. But the real big question I have for you, and I think this is something that I find myself asking, I know other artists and creative people and just people who give a people who care. Sorry, people who care. I got a potty mouth when I'm not at work, and this feels kind of like work personal. But why didn't you just make a painting? Why didn't you art about it, right? A lot of creative people are like, I want to do more. I'm an artist, so like I'll make a painting that says my thing. I'll do a portrait of George Marshall Clark, right? Like for you, and especially with that anthropology question, why did it have to go down that path for you?
I'm so inspired by James Baldwin. With him being who he was during the time of the movement that he was in, he was not able to march with them. He was not able to march for Malcolm X. He was not able to march for Martin Luther King because he was a gay black man, and they were not going to accept him there. So I thought a lot about that. How else could I make an impact? That was not so much self-centered about myself. Yeah. Ooh, sorry, y'all.
Well, I think that goes back to that idea, though, of the pedestal and the humility. And but your role in that, I think, was really, really important. And I think it's also amazing, too. Forest Home Cemetery, if you're not familiar with, it's a great place to visit. There's a lot of history there.
Ooh, sorry.
Oh,
yeah.
no.
No, I'm good. I'm good. I get emotional when I talk about it because I'm not really over it, like that's being an artist. We're emotional. So
yeah, I feel that. And I think it's really, I think it's really great too, because your Forest Home Cemetery, the folks there are very knowledgeable, respectful. Like, I had a project I was working around funerary arts and things, and they were super helpful, super open to creativity and artistry. So shout out to them too. But Forest Home Cemetery, I think, is really known for the big names in Milwaukee. You've got like the beer barons. You've got like, if there's a street or a building.
Yeah.
And, the fact that they held, the remains and that they now are marked, I think is really powerful to consider. You can go there and learn the full history, right? You're seeing the whole story of Milwaukee, good, bad, and, courageous and otherwise, right?
Yeah.
So I find that really, really powerful. And thank you. Thank you for
the
that
add-on
work.
to that, we actually, Adiah Winter, who's my partner in crime, in terms of like the research behind Marshall and us getting that, sort of activated. We went up to Forest Home Cemetery recently. We were invited by Sarah Wong, who's doing their tours, and they added Marshall to the tour. And that was just one of those things where it was like, mission accomplished to a degree, like, like he's stamped in.
Yeah.
And then we found a second person. So he's also getting his acknowledgement as well. So
that's amazing. Yeah, you got the ball rolling. So when you're talking about wanting to jump back into anthropology and that sort of work, what would be your dream project in that regard? And I mean, when I say dream, it's not, money's not an issue, time's not an issue. You can go to Mars if you want, if that involves the process, right?
Well, I have this whole idea that black people in Milwaukee need heroes. Like, we're like ground zero for a lot of like the bad stuff demographically, like for black people. Like, we are ground zero. And I think that the black kids here need to see positive reflections of people that walked the same lane they do. And there is a whole caucus of Black abolitionists who were active in this city that we know nothing about. So that's what that mission is. Stumbling across Marshall was stumbling across his dad, who was an abolitionist. It was stumbling across how his story was connected to Joshua Glover, and how he was connected to Ezekiel Gillespie. I don't know if I said his name right. And how he was like living during the time of the Warrens. So I'm like, what would it look like for a documentary where we addressed all of these different people during this timeline and how it all worked, right? That's my dream.
That sounds amazing. So what I'm hearing too is like small walkie has always been small walkie, right?
Mm-hmm.
And let's take advantage of that. Let's tell those stories with one another. I love that. Excellent. So thinking about, you know, the passion, the drive that you had to tell those stories and create your work, you know, we talked about having jobs, having other paths. Like, how do you sustain yourself? So, you know, is art the thing that sustains yourself? Like, you do it, it inspires you to do more. Are there external things that fuel you and keep you positive, going, happy throughout the life, the world that we live in?
I think art's hard now as a teacher because it's mostly commission based now. I don't really have time to just do what it is that I feel like doing half the time. I'm either grading or I'm completing a commission. So, excuse me, as a professional, it's changed. Hopefully not forever, but yeah. Sure.
Any projects coming up that you're particularly excited about? Any commission or non? Any projects you're working on behind the scenes that are unfinished that you haven't had time to get to?
I have a lot of unfinished projects. I'm still on this like Black bodies in green spaces kick. So that is, you know, putting Black people in water, putting them in green spaces with like trees and forest around them. It doesn't matter if it's a commission or not. And, you know, if you want to commission something from me, it's probably going to have leaves in it. Like, just saying. So I find ways to make it work. Yeah.
I don't want to like peel back the curtain from Oz, right? But have there been any commissions that you found you had to get real creative with to squeeze in your vision as an artist? I love hearing that. First off, like, they're paying you to do a thing, so they're going to get you in it.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Can you share a little? I'm curious. Like, has someone been like paint a gas station and then you're like, but I'm going to make it beautiful and green?
There was this guy that wanted a motorcycle. And I'm just like, I don't do like mechanics. Like, that's really tedious. Like, I have to like really sit there and like plan out how I'm like going to draw this thing. Like, I don't do graphic design. Well, like I do, but like not professionally. Like, I don't. So it was a lot, and I don't think I ever finished that commission. To be honest with you, it was just my mind just couldn't. I feel like a lot of us artists who kind of hit that wall too. We're just like, no,
yeah, like
this isn't working. So yeah, I don't think I ever finished that one.
We won't tell anybody, right?
Hey, they know now.
That's I feel that completely. Like mechanical things, lettering. Yeah, you have to be in a zone for some of that, and it's not easy to get to. So thinking about the things that you're like not creatively inclined to do, you're also a musician, right? Do you feel like there's kind of a synergy or like a transition between the two, like or linkage, I guess would be the best word? Or do you feel like those two worlds are like, my art's about one thing, my music's about another thing? Do you want to keep those separate at times?
That's a really interesting question because my senior thesis was a mixture of those things. It was going to be before they made me change it. We were talking about that earlier. But when I was at MyAd, I wanted to create like museum-like spaces where like I'm crafting and sculpting like the entire like scenery, then like lighting it to set a mood, and then, you know, creating the music that like, you know, that people, whatever, just creating the music, creating the ambiance of the space as well. So like that would have merged all of those things in a great marry, I feel, that I have not experienced yet. But one day when I have the funding, yes.
Okay, so those worlds are going to collide.
It's definitely going to collide.
Do you, when you look at your work, or while you're making it, do you feel like there's a sound to the work? Do you feel like there's a musicality to it, or are you, you got another track on in the background? It's not in here?
I do feel like there's a musicality to it. Like the music that I make myself is even more holistic. Like I said, I'm more spiritual, but it's more holistic. Like, it's like I don't want to make songs that's gonna make you feel sad. Like, if it starts off sad, it's gonna have a positive message at the end of it, and I think about nature in that way as well, So yeah, the space is gonna the sounds even would probably like encompass more like naturalistic sounds to kind of create the instrumentation of it.
I like that. I'm going to look at your work a little differently now, like thinking for sound as well. Do you think, was that influenced by anything in particular? Like, do you feel like you had an experience that formed that idea that your work has a sound to it, or that there's an immersive quality to it?
Maybe what I listen to when I'm actually painting.
Okay. Do you find that affects your work?
Yeah.
Do you get in trouble that way sometimes? Like, do you ever start off a painting being like, I've got this in mind, this is the vision, but then you got something too much beat, not enough, too fast, too slow?
Too much beat will mess it up sometimes.
Okay.
Too much beat will like dilute the message. I don't know if that makes sense. Like, I'm not even in the same headspace as what I was when I started painting this.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I asked that because I used to listen to like house music and electronica stuff when I was doing figure sculpture, and I'm like, that's not a good mix. Like,
like when you're just like being really patient.
Yeah, trying, and then I got this thing pounding in my head. Like, it just wasn't working.
That's rough.
And also back in the days of CD players in a room full of clay dust, they didn't last very long, so I used to burn through those quite a bit too.
Well, I guess a comparison is like whenever I was in white spaces for a long time, I would just listen to crazy trap music in my head. And I feel like a lot of people do that, but yeah, just contrast.
I think that also talks to, you're talking about some of your live painting experiences as well. So being in the zone. So you also do work, public artwork, right? You put stuff out there. Can you talk a little bit about that and your feelings towards it? So, as somebody who's working in a studio, you're in a classroom, you got music going on, live painting type stuff too. Like, is that a different experience to you to do public art? Is it in line with the work? Are there commissions public art wise that you have not taken on, that you're kind of not quite into? Tell me a little bit about that.
I mean, public work is always good, I feel like, because as an artist, you want people to see you so that they can value your work, So like anytime it's in public, it's amazing. Yeah, it just depends on who's asking.
Okay.
Which I think, it just depends on who's asking. Sometimes people ask and you're just like, I don't know about you. But other than that, no, I like to take public gigs.
As an aspiring person wanting to get into public art, what are some of the things that you would advise them to maybe watch out for? Like, who are some of the people not who, no, don't name names. Don't name names.
Oh no, we're name dropping.
We're not going there. But what are some of those maybe like red flags or warning signs when you're getting a commission, when you're getting a public gig, that make you kind of reevaluate or maybe step back a little bit and say, I want my work to be out there, but this is concerning.
If they don't align with your values, like if it's a business or a company that does not align with your values, like I would ultimately say don't do it. Because now your work is the face of something that you don't want to be associated with. And that stands, it's just going to be there. Like, so that's really the main thing for me. Like, people are kind of iffy with money. So pay attention to that. Like, do you actually value me, as a person and as an artist? Or do you value my product and what I bring? Or are you going to throw me chump change? And you'll get that from a lot of nonprofits. I love them, but I love the work they do in the community, but they oftentimes use us as artists. So not saying that about AW. You guys have always looked out for me. So it's True School. Shout out to True School. I got to put that out there. But yeah. So a lot of nonprofits use artists. So yeah, just be intentional about like who you want to be as an entrepreneur, like, and how you want to make your mark. Like if you start off taking chump change, then it's going to take a while for people to start offering you the money that you want.
That's a good message. So I'm always fascinated with this idea that arts are constantly undervalued, but then also taken advantage of, right? So like if you don't value what we're doing, why are you wanting it so much and sometimes for free or for very little, right?
Free be crazy.
And you want it bad, right?
Free be crazy because it tugs on your heartstrings. Free be crazy, but yeah.
With that in mind, like when you say that like organizations, nonprofits, businesses like use artists, like when you think of that, what is that word used? What are we being used for as artists?
Publicity, to be seen good. Their image is whatever you produce for them. You know what I mean? Whether it be music or sometimes people, like there was the whole like the DEI wave before Trump took it away, where everybody needed something, you know, of color in their space. So, you know, a lot of artists of color were being hired for these nonprofit gigs that we've never been hired for before. Like we're rapping to corporates. And it's just like this really weird shift. That's not so much a thing anymore. It's kind of, you know, with the shift happening. But yeah.
What do you feel like, or do you feel like there's anything that feels out of character with the work that you do that you'd love to be part of? Like when you talk about corporates, like what are some corporates that you'd love to see your work plastered on, you know, representative of you?
That's hard.
It's tough, right? Yeah.
I mean, because nonprofits, I can name them all, but corporates I normally don't deal.
Okay.
But maybe one day in the future, I think National Geographic would be amazing. You know, to just get some work, not even just artwork, but maybe I do something cool in the other world of like anthropology or archaeology, and I'm in National Geographic. I would love that.
That's cool.
You know, so I don't know.
No, that's good. I love that. Anthropology has always been interesting to me in my personal work, just because it's hard to think about art being outside of the human experience, right? And as a study of the human experience, it feels like there's got to be some, you got to dip into it a little bit, like even if it's just a tiny bit. But I like that idea. So again, National Geographic, if you're listening in, you know,
Oh
if
yeah,
you see
right
this,
on. Hit me up.
Well, and another goal I have with this program too, though, is how can we kind of create an archive, right? Like how can people years from now who want to understand what artists were going through, what type of environment, context, time, place, right? So, you know, I'm not saying this is going to be in a time capsule somewhere, but it's going to live on the internet, right?
That's fair.
Ends up somewhere. All right. So
we're in the middle of our renaissance though. So just like to your last point, it's renaissancing. Milwaukee's art community is overflowing right now. And we have been like, you know, for the last 5-ish, 10-ish years, starting to get a little bit more national attention around the work that we do in the city. So it's our renaissance time. And we're lucky to be a part of it, you know, historically.
And I'm going to throw it out there, and I don't mean to be the wet blanket, but as someone who's a little bit older, I've been hearing that for a long time. Like, oh, Milwaukee's gonna break open. Like we're gonna hit the national scene. Everybody's eyes are on us.
It's happening though.
What do you see as those like
our music scene's blowing up? I mean, the Bucks kind of did it, you know, that's like for a second. Like didn't last long, but they did it for a second, and you know that was enough to kind of get the ball rolling for, you know, a few of us.
Sure. So thinking about that too, that idea of like the intersection of athletics and art, right? What are your thoughts on that? I say this as somebody who
it's the same thing as it is with corporates. We're the face for you. Like we dress you, the clothing, the design, like the graphics, like, you know, we are the power behind the visual machine. So
I love that. That's intense. The visual machine though, I think is a really, like, it's true. It's really true. And when you look at throughout history too, how the visual machine has been used. So it's 2025. Okay. If we were a couple thousand years ago, there'd be like statues and, you know, paintings of an emperor or a leader or what have you. Why in the modern era do you still feel compelled to paint as your contribution to the machine, right? Is that still an effective contribution? Is it still as powerful as it may have been?
I wonder what my value would be in a world where machines didn't exist in the way that they do now, or like like say if I lived before all of this technology and the way we live, like what would be my value to the world? Like I'm able to reproduce and replicate things that people want, you know, like, you know, memories. People are going to die. They're going to grow old. I can use my intelligence, my spatial intelligence to draw a face, you know, and that's something that I feel is fairly valuable, you know, like, and especially during that time period, like artists were paid people, you know, it was a whole job to be able to, not a lot of people could afford it, and jobs probably came far and in between, but it was still something that was needed. It was necessary.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting. I just get this time warp of like, what would an artist do for like their buddy or a family friend? You know, like I'm sure the tiny piece of papyrus or scrap paper that they did a little portrait on might not have survived like their oil paintings or sculptures did, but it'd be interesting to be able to see how that relationship evolved with artists and regular folk that weren't paying for the art. All right. So talking a little bit about it, this is getting a little on the less than positive side maybe, but for the sake of young artists, newer artists, what were some of the barriers that you encountered, and what were some of the strategies, what were some of the things that you used to like overcome, circumvent, mitigate, you know, like how did you work through all that as a
Like
human
an emerging
being?
artist, or what do you mean?
Barriers, like what type of stuff got in your way and you're like,
Oh,
you know,
man,
this is
life.
too much, this doesn't have to be there. I wish
Literally
I
just
could.
being black in Milwaukee was enough. Like, I don't, you know, like not to be like cliche, but
No,
like
no,
that
no.
is, yeah, the many life, you know, struggles, like even like identity crisis, like coming from Milwaukee Lutheran High School and then going to the hood, going back home, and then going to Myad, and that being even more of a shift culturally, like that definitely messed me up for a while, like in terms of my, you know, my own identity and like how I fit into the world. Like, am I too black for the white people? Am I too white for the, you know, for the black people? So yeah, that informed my artwork for a very long time. Like that searching for identity.
So would you say that the search itself and the art became the way of kind of working through that and coping with that, or is that part
The
of
search
the
is how I
problem?
found Marshall. I ended up having to do this independent study at Myad because they had no courses there that had anything to do with like African American studies. And me as a black artist, if I'm making work that is about my community, I need to be able to research that work in order for it to be informed. So I had to do an independent study, and like that, I found Marshall through that, like while searching for my identity, and then circle back around, I find this man in his grave. So yeah.
Yeah, that's definitely a barrier when you're looking for something to support your education and growth that's not there for you and having to kind of chart that course.
Yeah.
So in terms of that, how that informed your work, like I feel like I saw kind of a shift in the work or the nature of the work that you were doing. But that's just my perspective. Like, did you see a shift in your work? Did you see, you know, just looking, like not even like conceptually, but do you feel like it affected the way you handled material, the way you approached the canvas?
You mean that's the 2020 thing, or?
Yeah, or like, you know, that idea of discovering that, having that
Okay,
opportunity
fair.
to make the study or to do that
I think
independent study.
that
and find the
independent
path.
study more so helped with, I don't know, accepting that I was who I was and that was not going to change. And just like I started doing, like, I got angry. I started doing like slave rape pieces and like just being like really wild and like loud about it. I'm not so much on that spectrum of art anymore. Doesn't always have to be, you know, right in people's face like that. But I learned a lot about how to present and like how I wanted to be seen as an artist around that time. So yeah.
Yeah. What I'm kind of hearing from that too is that the artwork becomes that kind of catharsis too. Like it's okay to let yourself go with art and let their feelings out, as opposed to maybe feeling like your art needs to look a certain way or be a certain way or fit in a constraint.
Yeah.
So make what you want to make, get it out there, and then see where it takes you. It's not necessarily the end of the journey, right?
Right.
It's part of it.
Right. Yeah.
Okay. just thinking back to some of that senior thesis confinement, right? It can be hard to try to fit in a box and still keep all the stuff in yourself coming out too, right?
Yeah, I think we both did it though. So I actually remember your thesis. So,
well, it's tough when you're trying to get a grade for something, right? And you're feeling like maybe saying the thing you want to say might not be accepted or keeping you on that path.
Excuse me. That was a part of my journey though. I feel like what I was told in my thesis was that you don't have enough like knowledge of this subject matter that you're researching. And like again, I said, there was no like studies courses there, so they were right. So yeah, that unfortunately there were some barriers in terms of that, but hey, that's cool.
Well, you're doing awesome stuff. So you overcame those barriers or you worked through them. Speaking of kind of looking back, what advice or perspective do you wish would have been shared with you? Like what was missing? Maybe what do you know now that you wish somebody had shared, and how can you maybe share that with the next generation of creatives?
I think just remember like the flow conversation that we were having before. Like you have to be able to let stuff go. Like, in your creative world, like in terms of business, you cannot cling to things. Like you can't cling to every piece of artwork that you make. You have to let things go. Otherwise, you'll become a storage unit. But just like like you just let go of jobs that don't make sense. Let go of a project or an idea that is not grasping. Like just let it go. If it comes back, it does. But if it doesn't, then that was what's supposed to happen. Like for real. Like don't be going in circles about the same thing over and over. Like that's just life advice.
It's important advice though.
Yeah.
Do you how far do you go with letting it go? Do you
I let things go. Like people get mad.
You throw them out the window? Do you burn them? Do you once a
I don't
year
burn
go
bridges.
through?
I don't burn anything. I'm not setting anything on fire. I put caution tape up and I go, do not cross. And if the time comes when I need to cross it, there's just tape there, not a bridge, it's not burned down. So I do that with relationships too. Like I keep everybody in my circle. I try not to burn my bridges. Keep everybody in the loop. And if time comes when I need to walk through that door again, then it's not on fire.
I love that advice. And I was being a little more literal with like the physical artwork. Just throw stuff away. But that is that's a way better piece of advice.
Well, fair.
Thank you for taking it that direction because mine was much more dumb. Let's see. This is a good one, I think, because you do a lot of stuff. We talked about anthropology, music, visual arts, all that. Is there anything outside of those that maybe comes out of left field that you wish you were skilled in? Is there any like technique, anything, art or non-art related?
You said that I wish I was skilled in?
Yeah.
What's weird, this might sound really weird that I'm going to say this, but I feel like I touch everything.
Okay.
I feel like I can't think of one thing that I haven't touched right now because I've played with pretty much every form of art that I could try to.
Sure.
Whether it be like cooking, dancing, singing, whether it be the visual arts, whether it be photography, graphic design, I've done it all. There are things though, like techniques, welding, I could be better at. I feel like I would really like to dive deep into learning how to like weld really well.
I appreciate too that you have been elevating like cooking and things that people might not always think of as an art form. I truly believe that anything can be an art form. Like there's a way you can, listen to produce and hear for what's ripe and what's not, or the smell, or like you can live artfully in so many different ways. And I'm not quite sure what the jumping off point between something just being normal and artful is, but
it's
when you
the
see
intention.
The
like,
intention?
like how did you compose this masterpiece? Like it's the thought process behind it. I think with all of it, like every recipe is different. Like they thought about the different ingredients and how they were going to go into whatever meal they're making, how they're going to taste. Like so,
intention. Yeah, I like that. That's huge. So I think I gotta check on the time here because I think we've been covering a lot of ground and I'm really happy about that. But I think we're running a little low. Okay. So I'm gonna find a really crazy fun one, and then I'd like to turn it over to you to share a few things. This might be a good one. What is a question that you were hoping to be asked today that maybe you didn't get asked?
I don't know. I don't know if I like questions in general.
I'm sorry.
I don't know if I have hope for questions. Like, I don't know. I'm actually like I tend to be really shy until people are forcing it out of me. So
Okay.
yeah, I keep to myself. Like I go into my meetings at the school and I like sit in the corner and I'm like, don't socialize. But yeah,
that is a great answer, and I apologize.
No worries.
I appreciate the time. I appreciate this.
Because I also appreciate it at the same time. It's like weird.
And then another fun one is, what's the most unusual thing you've ever used to make art?
Oh man, my whole college career, I was like using found items because I did not have money. I was like using mesh, acrylic mesh to paint on for like canvases, and it was so heavy, but it was free. So, yeah, I don't know. I painted on tires, a mirror.
That's cool.
I don't know. Anything I could find.
I love
Yeah,
that.
anything I could find.
The inspiration is everywhere.
Yeah.
You got the sign here too. It looks like.
Oh yeah, this was a street sign, by the way. It said children playing, and it had like a seesaw. I just painted over it.
I love that. I love the message under the sign too. I've wondered that before, so I'm happy to hear that it was that. Well, and I know you said you're shy and you got to have it kind of squeezed out, but I always like to give everybody time to share something that you just want to. You know, I think we all have unique perspectives, journeys, passions, paths. So you got the floor if there's anything that you just want to share, you want to put out in the world.
Thank you for, allowing me to be here with you all, in this space. And in terms of like anything to share, I just wish the world was a better place. And I think we could all be a lot more intentional about how, what we're doing and how we're seeing other people. Yeah, I just think that there should be a lot more mindfulness.
I like that.
Yeah.
I like that. Your work has that mindfulness quality to it, being in nature, flowing. I like that. So being mindful to everyone else who might have questions or thoughts or want to share, we like to open it up and give a little time for Q&A. So if anyone in the room has anything they'd like to share or ask, I see a question over here.
Well, how did you acquire the street sign?
In case it wasn't heard, it's a good question, and maybe it's best not to answer.
It was just laying on the street one day, and I just walked past. I was like, ooh.
The question was, how did you acquire the street sign?
I didn't snatch it. I didn't snatch it off the pole or anything.
That's good. I'm glad we're not getting anybody in trouble.
Oh, no.
All right. Any other questions or thoughts? Any curiosities?
Hand over the mic as well if anybody has questions.
All right.
What's your favorite form of art? What's your favorite form of art? Or favorite thing to do when it comes to art?
I am in love with terracotta clay, and I haven't touched it in a very long time. But that experience in college, like being able to mold, I felt godlike. I was not even like in a weird sense, but God, people say that we were made out of clay, and like our form, like it was just weird. It was just like, never mind.
Oh no, you could.
No, almost like doing in college, you like experiment with a lot of stuff. Like if I was on like LSD or something, I would have thought like that I was God with my hands in the clay. Like it just something about our connection to God and our ability to create. Like it just, I love it. Yeah, I love it.
So that's like pottery or?
Just sculpting. Like I did a bust. Like that was normally my thing. Like human faces in form. That's normally my go-to in any art form that I'm doing. It's normally the human form. So yeah, just getting my hands in some clay and like sculpting out a face, and like it's just something about the being able to capture that emotion in like real time. Like it's like 3D in front of you. It's like, I don't know.
I love that materiality too of the clay, because clay forms along like bodies of water, riverbanks. It's the silt that accumulates. It's kind of that transitory
It's like back
space
to earth, like I'm a kid playing in mud.
Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah, that's awesome. There's also pottery too, that idea of the vessel, and that it holds air, it holds space. There's almost like a breathing quality to clay too, like when you're working air into it or out of it, or putting it in the kiln and firing it and adding that element. So
Yeah,
I like clay too.
it's fun.
So are you doing any clay units with your students? Did you get to explore that
Well,
soon?
if they can behave, you know how this goes. But, you know, I have certain classes that are more capable. So I do have plans on teaching them some things. It's also funding too, you know, making sure we have enough clay to make that happen. But I do have plans in the future, not anytime soon. Yeah, if they can handle it, I'll teach them.
So if any of those students are listening in, please behave so you can do a really cool clay project with Tyrone. Do you go by your first name in the classroom?
I do. I'm not like, don't call me Mr. Randle. I'm not ready. I'm not ready.
I love that too. And yeah, I don't know if we had any questions out on the out in the interweb world, but these are going to be available to watch at a future date. We're all really open to dialoguing. I think, you know, artists working in education is all about bringing artists and creatives together. You're welcome to reach out to us with any questions or thoughts that you have for any of the artists after the fact. We'll see if we can kind of incorporate some of that into future discussions. And we also want to make sure that people understand that the creative community is the community, right? It's not this isolated, I don't know, like cabal, cadre, group of people trying to keep people out. Like Tyrone, you were saying, you want to get your art out there, you want to be seen, you want to be understood by people too. So accessibility is really huge, especially in fields like art that has been historically made exclusive to keep people out, keep some people in, and keep that wealth that sustains creative practice, or clay purchasing for doing things like that. Isolated in certain areas or within certain demographics. So connect with us, connect with Washington Park Media Center. They do great work as well in community with media arts, but also just bringing people together. We host events with partner Denizen up the way, 43rd and Valete, that happen monthly. So you're welcome to come out for those in anticipation of Washington Park Wednesdays. So we're really trying to activate this area, this community, reach out, connect, and we're happy to answer questions and keep the conversation going beyond the hour that we had today.
Right on.
Well, thank you, Tyrone. Unless there's anything you had to say, we can kind of sign off and get to some mingling.
Just remember, we're all co-creators of this reality, so let's do it.
I love that. Thank you all.
Right on.